Okay, we're moving on with part two of the gastrointestinal connection to fibromyalgia. In the last video, we talked about the gastrointestinal system as a second brain that has the ability to communicate and remember. Now, moving on from there, the digestive system is a portal for food nutrients to get into the circulatory system, which relays it to every cell of the body, and there are billions of them. Before this can happen, the food has to be reduced to very simple molecules by a combination of mechanical and chemical degradation. That's another way of saying you got to chew it with your mouth, and then the chemicals in your body, the acids, break the food down. The resulting molecules are the building blocks of life: sugars, amino acids, fatty acids, which are then transported across the epithelium lining of the gastrointestinal system into the blood. That's very important. Therefore, the GI system has to take food from your plate, break it down into such a small molecule that it can make its way through the gut lining into the bloodstream. So not only does it have to break down, digest, and assimilate your food, it has to protect you from whatever would be harmful if it made its way into your blood and into your cells. There are three main barriers in the body: the brain barrier, the lung barrier, and the gut barrier. When these barriers are compromised, disease is the result. And one of the main jobs of your gut is to keep this barrier from compromise. And compromise of this barrier is really one of our main concerns from a healthcare perspective and when considering the restoration of good health. The GI tract is connected to every major system in the human body. Over 70% of the human immune system is located in the gastrointestinal tract. The GI tract communicates with every major receptor using its own intercellular mediators. It is responsible for the production, get this, of 99% of the body's neurotransmitters. In addition, the GI tract has a very high metabolic function and impacting nutrient absorption, elimination of toxins, hormone metabolism, energy production, and much more. Remember, the gut lining not only has to absorb nutrients, ushering them into the bloodstream, it also has to keep foreign invaders from getting into the bloodstream itself. A healthy GI tract has tight intercellular junctions, much like my fingers being tight together. These junctions are designed to prevent the absorption of bacteria, food antigens, which would be bad guys, and other mid-size and larger molecules. When they open up, trouble happens. During times of chronic inflammation or chronic stress, which increases cortisol production, the intestinal membrane has the potential of losing those tight junctions and allowing the passage of antigens, or bad guys, that are not small in molecular weight, and they get into the bloodstream. This may cause foods to be absorbed as polypeptides and proteins instead of the much smaller amino acids. This abnormal absorption can cause an inflammatory response to occur, which in turn will exaggerate the immune response. For the fibromyalgia patient, this is a trigger that has the potential of causing flare-ups. And I've talked about the cause of flare-ups in the past, but let me restate that larger than normal food particles can slip from the gut into the blood, causing your immune system to attack those food particles as if they're foreign invaders. This causes systemic or system-wide inflammation, which can cause pain, fatigue, brain fog, as well as gastrointestinal distress and a whole lot of other issues we'll cover later. This is very bad for those suffering from an autoimmune condition and can actually cause an autoimmune condition in some cases. It is really important that you understand that inflammation is the enemy. Now, in your GI tract, if it's inflamed, it can't digest and break down food for nourishment, and it has trouble keeping out foreign invaders. As you will soon see, it can affect your whole body. If your GI tract is inflamed, it can't digest and break down food for nourishment, and it has trouble keeping out foreign invaders. As you'll soon see, it can affect your whole body. Now, inflammation can be caused by parasites, large food particles, bacteria like H. pylori, hypochlorhydria, which is basically not enough stomach acid, yeast overgrowth, bacterial dysbiosis, which is where your good bacteria are outnumbered by your bad bacteria. The byproduct of this bacteria, like parasites and yeast overgrowth, is often toxic and causes an immune response. Inflammation caused by gastrointestinal triggers can have a very serious impact on the risks associated with cardiovascular disease, chronic fatigue, neurodegeneration, inability to lose weight, mood, depression, anemia, thyroid function, and of course, fibromyalgia. The following conditions could stem from GI dysfunction. I just mentioned anemia. I'm talking about B12 deficiency. It appears that optimal absorption of B12 is dependent upon adequate levels of hydrochloric acid, pancreatic enzymes, and a healthy brush border in the GI tract. Mood and depression. GI dysfunction can have a dramatic impact on mood due to its influence on neurotransmitter synthesis and glucose absorption. It should be noted that the enteric nervous system is responsible for producing 99% of the body's serotonin levels. Keep in mind, serotonin is the happy neurotransmitter. So it has a lot to do with mood, but it's also the signaling neurotransmitter, which means that it signals the other neurotransmitters when to act. Inability to lose weight. GI inflammation can disrupt cellular communication and make weight loss very difficult. GI inflammation has the potential to inhibit the breakdown of stored fat. Cardiovascular disease. You may not think much of that, but inflammation caused by GI triggers can have serious impact on the risks associated with cardiovascular disease. Numerous studies have demonstrated the role that C-reactive protein plays as a marker for cardiovascular disease. Now, neurodegeneration. GI inflammation or GI inflammatory response will produce inflammatory cytokines that travel to all regions of the body and initiate a global reaction, including glial cells of the brain. The glial cells within the brain structures also produce inflammatory cytokines and neurotoxic agents. So they're toxic to the brain, which can damage neurons, which is nerve cells in the brain or brain cells, and cause cell death. This has been associated with dreaded conditions like Alzheimer's disease, Huntington's disease, multiple sclerosis, as well as edema and seizures. So that could be why the fibromyalgia sufferer has brain fog or memory loss. And then we've got chronic fatigue, which is also a big issue for fibromyalgia sufferers. GI dysfunction can have adverse effects on energy production in several different ways. Of course, anytime food, vitamins, and minerals are not absorbed, the entire body is compromised. In addition to that, we know that dysfunction in the GI tract inhibits the conversion of inactive thyroid hormones from T4 to T3, which is the active form. And that, of course, will affect your energy and cause fatigue. As you can see, there's almost no area that is not affected by a dysfunctioning gastrointestinal system, and I have only scratched the surface. So if you're like 90% of my patients, you know that you're struggling with some form of gastrointestinal distress. That might take the form of indigestion, acid reflux, gas and bloating, gastrointestinal, diarrhea, constipation, nausea, brain fog, achy joints, stiffness, fatigue, skin outbreaks. The list literally goes on and on. I think you can see that it would be easy for chronic diseases to stem from an unhealthy gastrointestinal tract. Our gastrointestinal system is under constant assault by the way we live in the West, the foods that we eat, the things that we drink. The answer to this problem goes back to diet and lifestyle change. Hippocrates was known as the father of modern medicine. He said, let your food be your medicine and your medicine be your food. Unfortunately, today the foods that we eat are packed with sugar, which is your enemy, bad fats, preservatives, artificial sweeteners, genetically modified ingredients. So there is trouble in our diet, and that is a big source of degenerative conditions and chronic illnesses. It's not the only thing to consider when attempting to restore a person's health, but without a healthy gut, nothing else will be able to function properly. We'll talk more.